I'm going to come back to members on this matter, but I'm going to encourage all members.
Nobody pays to see the referee.
I'm going to encourage all members to please keep their counsel when they're not recognized by the chair. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for your remonstrations, but I have to tell you, speaking for myself, puerile playground insults from the maple syrup mega don't bother me one bit.
As I mentioned, order. Order. This is precisely the reason why we should be very mindful of our language, because the things will be said on all sides which is going to be disturbing to the order of the House. I'm going to come back to this matter, and I'm going to ask the Deputy Prime Minister to start her question again without using those words. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
As I said, Mr. Speaker, I can handle it. But what makes me really mad, what I can't handle, is seeing crocodile tears from these Conservatives. The only time they care, notice vulnerable Canadians, is for a partisan photo op. And we know they don't care because they are opposed to a national school food program that is feeding 400,000 Canadian kids. They're opposed to dental care that is helping 1 million. We care about Canadians, they just care about themselves.
The Honourable Member from Battleford, Lloydminster.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs up, crime's up, and you know what? Time is up. This costly NDP Liberal coalition has doubled the cost of housing, and the majority of Canadians are unable to keep up with their grocery needs. Canadians have had enough. But the NDP Liberal coalition only wants to drive up costs by quadrupling their carbon tax. Will the Prime Minister finally call a carbon tax election so Conservatives can offer Canadians some relief?
The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, under the Conservative leader, slogans are up, rhymes are up, and parroting talking points so you get a shiny gold star and caucus seems to be up. I cannot imagine diminishing myself when I have the opportunity to represent my community in the House to cheapen the arguments that we can put forward on the floor of the House of Commons. If they care about helping people, why don't they actually support the policies that help build homes for people who can't afford them? Why don't they actually help advance policies that let families put food on the table, whether that is childcare, a middle-class tax cut, or the Canada Child Benefit? Every time we put measures forward to help Canadians, they vote against it and stand up with this nonsense.
The Honourable Member from Battleford, Lloydminster.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you the Canadians that are lined up at food banks aren't buying their pathetic rhetoric. The parliamentary budget officer has already confirmed once again that the carbon tax is costing Canadians more than they receive in rebates. And for families in Saskatchewan, the quadrupled carbon tax is $2,000. Will the Prime Minister finally give Canadians the carbon tax election that they so desperately need?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me provide a few facts to the honourable member. Fact, the PBO confirmed that the vast majority of Canadians get more money back than they pay. Fact, over 300 economists say carbon pricing is the best way to reduce emissions that is best for the economy. Fact, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith said her family gets more money back with the carbon rebate. Fact, Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe said he looked at all alternatives to the carbon price and they were all too expensive. We are reducing emissions while we are addressing affordability. On that side side of the House, they have no plan to address climate change. They are actively denying the reality of climate change. They have no plan for the economy. Shame on you.
The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Let's speak about facts. Mr. Speaker, young Quebecers listening to us are seeing a future dream of theirs disappear. That dream is of becoming a homeowner. In just 5 years, house prices in Quebec have increased by 74%. That's more than $1,000 more a month for a mortgage. The crisis was fueled, Mr. Speaker, by the Liberal government's compulsive deficits, with the enthusiastic support of the Bloc Québécois. Can the Prime Minister stand, look Canadians in the eye and say why he's made their life worse? The Honourable Minister for Tourism. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to remind my honourable colleague that it's this government that created the first national housing strategy that built thousands of housing units throughout the country. Not only that, Mr. Speaker, we've also created a tax-free savings account. Do you know how many young people have signed up? My brother, for example, who's 33, 700,000 young Canadians throughout the country who will see their dreams come true thanks to this government, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, it's not the Conservatives that are saying this. The Real Estate Brokers Association have noted this. $400,000 average price in Quebec City, $460,000 in Gatineau on average, $590,000 on average in Montreal. Mr. Speaker, beyond the numbers, we see broken dreams and ambitions for young Quebecers under the leadership of this government. I invite the member for Papineau, Prime Minister, to rise today and explain to young Canadians and Quebecers why he's made things worse for them and why they can't even buy a house because of his leadership. The Honourable Minister for Public Works and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague for Louis Saint Laurent, who I like very much, talks about ambitions and numbers. He should talk about the ambitions and the numbers of his Conservative leader. When he was Minister for Housing, during his entire mandate, throughout the country, built not one, not two, but hold on to your hats, 6 entire housing units, Mr. Speaker. He should talk about his Conservative leader when it comes to ambition, so that he could visit 160,000 units that we have built in his riding alone. The Honourable Member for Drummond. Yesterday, Quebec's new lieutenant told us that the secular nature of the Quebec state is a matter for Quebec, not Ottawa. Well, he's absolutely right. Ottawa has absolutely no business meddling in secularism. It's none of Ottawa's business to meddle in Quebec's ability to live together. Thank you to the Minister for this reminder. So we understand that Ottawa has absolutely no intention of going to court to challenge a Quebec law that does not fall under the jurisdiction of the federal government, right? That's what we should understand. Isn't that what the Minister said yesterday? The Honourable Minister for Public Works and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And my colleague is right. It's provincial. It's education. If my colleague wants to inform and consult with the Quebec government, he shouldn't do so here. He should do that at the National Assembly of Quebec. That's the recommendation that I made to him yesterday. The Honourable Member for Drummond. The Prime Minister took advantage of his appearance on the Stephen Colbert show to declare, and I quote, "We are trying to ensure that people keep their culture, keep their language." Mr. Speaker, come on, that's not how integration works in Quebec. In Quebec, we agree on a common core: equality, religious neutrality, and French as the common language. Learning French and adhering to common values are part of integrating into Quebec. Does the federal government realise that its multiculturalism is simply incompatible with Quebec's model of integration? The Honourable Minister for Public Works and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, my colleague's right. Learning French, integrating into Quebec is being a Quebecer, growing and living in Quebec. That is the privilege of millions of Quebecers, including new immigrants. That's how things work in Quebec. He's right, and we're proud of it. The honourable member for Drummond. Ottawa wants to challenge Bill 21 in the courts and weaken secularism in Quebec. Ottawa maintains the religious exception in the Criminal Code. Ottawa refuses to allow the Multiculturalism Act to apply to Quebec. And the Prime Minister is telling Americans that everyone who comes to Canada can keep their language and that there is no common language, etc. There's no problem. In short, the federal government is undermining integration, harming secularism, and is hurting the French language. Does this government understand that what it should do is try not to hurt Quebec's ability to live together? The Honourable Minister for Public Works and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My Black Quebecois colleague, who I like very much, is just looking to squabble. Countless Quebecers, new Quebecers, arrive in Quebec because Quebec is part of Canada. When we're Quebecer, we are Canadian. And many new arrivals in my riding say that they are proud to be Quebecers and proud to be Canadians.
The honourable member from Fort McMurray, Cold Lake.
After 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs up, crimes up, and time is up. The Prime Minister's own parliamentary budget officer confirmed yet again that the carbon tax costs more to Canadians than they get back in rebates. When the NDP Liberals quadruple the carbon tax, families in Alberta will pay nearly $2,000 more in carbon taxes. Will the NDP Liberals finally admit their tax is simply a scheme and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, at the risk of correcting my honourable colleague from the other side, let me state very clearly, the PBO has indicated that 8 out of 10 Albertans get more money back from the Canada Carbon Rebate than they pay in carbon taxes. Mr. Speaker, but you don't have to take my word for it. You can take the word of Premier Danielle Smith, who said that not only did she get more money back because she lives in rural Alberta, she even got the 20% top-up. Sorry, my colleague, that's the fact.
I ask the honourable member from Miramichi Grand Lake not to take the floor unless he's recognized. The honourable member from Battleford, Lloydminster. Excuse me, from Fort McMurray, Cold Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canadians lined up at food banks really aren't buying that rhetoric. I'm sorry. Food bank usage is also up. Cold Lake Food Bank is the busiest it's ever been, with a 28% increase in usage over 2023, which itself saw an increase of 16% over 2022. The carbon tax is driving up the cost of groceries, gas, and heating, making things more difficult for families and food banks that are pushed to their limit. So the question's simple. Will the Prime Minister admit his carbon tax isn't working and call a carbon tax election?
I wonder what the other Randy thinks.
The Honourable Minister from Farmington Workforce Development.
Speaker, the numbers are in and the checks have already arrived. And in Alberta, a family of 4 gets $2,500 per year, which is more than they spend on the price on pollution, which is something the other side doesn't understand because, Mr. Speaker, they don't care if the planet burns. And, Mr. Speaker, let's go one step further. Why did that side vote against the Canada Child Benefit that gives $7,800 per kid in Alberta? Why did they vote against childcare? Why did they vote against supports for workers? They care about themselves, not about Canadians. We're on the side of Canadians each and every day.
The honourable member from Regina Leuven.
That much hot air could run a couple windmills, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs up, crime is up, and time is up. The parliamentary budget officer once again confirmed that Canadians pay much more and cost more than they get back in rebates. In Saskatchewan, after these guys quadruple the carbon tax, it's going to cost a family $2,000. That's $2,000 a year, Mr. Speaker. My question is, when will these Liberals call carbon tax elections so Canadians can have their say at the ballot box?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, it's really difficult to take any of this rhetoric seriously. When I was first elected 9 years ago, that party used to send checks to millionaires to help them with the cost of raising their families. That presented 2 questions. Millionaires would ask me in my riding, why am I getting this money? And people of lower income would ask me in my riding, why is it getting taxed back? What we did is we created a Canada Child Benefit that is tax-free and means tested. What we've also done is establish a national school food program. If you're really really serious about addressing child poverty and family poverty, why don't you get on board?
The honourable member from Chicoutimi-Lefia.
Mr. Speaker, the demand at our local food bank is skyrocketing, but the Bloc Québécois keeps supporting this incompetent government. It's ignoring Quebecers' real problems. The Bloc Québécois is not helping the regions. Saguenay families are desperate with rising grocery and housing prices. When will this Prime Minister trigger an election so that the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean can be represented by the only party that cares about regions, the Conservative Party, the Honourable Minister of Labour and Seniors? I'd like to thank my colleague from the Saguenay region. But after voting against lowering the retirement age, after voting against dental care, after voting against increasing the guaranteed income supplement for vulnerable seniors, now our colleague is getting up and asking why the cost of living is going up. Well, that's because your party will bring in cuts